Journey before destination. Well, I'm at the destination. I finished Wind and Truth. But did I like it? Hi there, and welcome to Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father and son talk about fantasy, science fiction, and other nerdy things we enjoy. It's just Jim, the father, here today to talk to you about Wind and Truth, a spoiler-light review and reaction video. My son and I both have read this novel, and we'll be bringing a full spoil, deep dive discussion about it to you soon. But that's not today. Today, it's a safe place if you haven't read it yet. Of course, if you have read it, you'll understand more deeply what I'm talking about. I hope you'll enjoy this and give us a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. So, Wind and Truth, Brandon Sanderson's next edition volume in the Stormlight Archive. It came out just this month, back on December 6th, 2024. There are very few books that I've made a point to grab and dive into the day they release. The last few Harry Potter novels, I certainly did that. The second half of the Wheel of Time series. We're talking books where I was invested in the series and I cared about the characters and was eager, chomping at the bit to get more and eventually resolution to the storylines. The Stormlight Archive has become such a series for me. And let's be honest here. Like many people, I'm not just reading the Stormlight Archive. I'm chasing down the story of the entire Cosmere. I'm just as interested in the outcome on Scadrial and Nalthis as I am here on Roshar. But that's where Wind and Truth had me so eager. It's become clear we're not just talking about the occurrences on Roshar, but that these occurrences, they have implications that reach far beyond that one planet. And we're not just hinting, no, just suggestions anymore. We're giving you big, direct impacts on the entire Cosmere. Finally, that's what I was here for. I'd previously read the first 4 books of the Stormlight Archive, plus the novellas Edge Dancer and Dawnshard. This year, I reread the 4 novels specifically to prepare for Wind and Truth. It's been 4 long years since Rhythm of War, so I wanted to come into this story with fresh recollections. Additionally, since 2020, I've consumed everything else in the Cosmere collection that I hadn't yet read. I covered a few things before that, but now I made sure I've got it all. Nothing's missing. I got the whole knowledge bowl packed in my head. And I feel like I've acquired a renewed appreciation for the masterwork that Brandon Sanderson is creating, both with his Stormlight Archive and the Cosmere as a whole. So as I began Wind and Truth, I felt pretty prepared for this novel and eager to see what I'd find. Let's dig into the details as I continue into this review. The Stormlight Archive's genre is epic fantasy, and Wind and Truth gives us the next volume of a really epic story. The setting is the planet of Roshar, with considerable activity taking place in Urithiru, the Shattered Plains, Thalena City, Azamir, and all across Shinovar. For the most part, that is, because elements of the story reach out far beyond these locations, even well beyond Roshar itself. What's the story about? Well, again, spoiler light. Rhythm of War left us where that agreement had been reached between Odium and Dalinar for a challenge of champions to occur 10 days hence, the winner earning some significant advantages. This massive novel is the story of those 10 days, and the challenge itself, and of course, the result. Over the course of the novel, we learn a ton of the background as to why circumstances in Roshar are as they are. We go back to the very start of things. We see tons of history. We learn so much key information. For a history junkie like me, even though this is fantasy, it was still delightful to get all this backstory, seeing so many oddities click into place. And so many questions finally answered. The crux of the narrative starts with Dalinar simply trying to discern how he can win the challenge. and what he needs to do to be fully prepared for it. However, a twist comes when it's discovered there's a weakness in the contract, the agreement for this challenge. Dalinar and his team, working with Wit and other great resources, Yasna, they really dove in, made a ironclad contract for this, but a weakness is found. This weakness is discovered because of odd actions that are happening out across the planet suddenly, and they realize Odium and his forces are making a massive, multi-pronged push to conquer as much of the world as possible in these last 10 days. So this leaves the opposition, the Knights Radiant, Urithiru, Alethkar in exile, the Azish Empire, and the island nation of Thalena, scrambling to rise to the challenge and withstand this last all-in pitched assault. They need to survive until the challenge. And they need to trust that Dalinar will find a way to win. So we end up with multiple critical stories as the forces of good divide their resources and try to stand strong against this one big last push. Adolin leads a contingent to support Azamir and the Azish. Yasna brings a force to support Thalen City. Sigzil, leader of the Windrunners now, is charged with defending Narak, the key to the Shattered Plains and the Oath Gate that is Urithiru's primary source of food and materials. And all will be pushed beyond their limits in this story. Meanwhile, Shallan remains in Urithiru on her own mission to confront Mraize and Yaddle and stop the threat of the Ghost Bloods here on Roshar. Renarin and R'lain, they're also still in Urithiru, each on their own personal journeys of growth and discovery. And then there's Szeth and Kaladin. Szeth is returning to Shinovar to confront his past and fulfill his mission, which is his path to achieving a higher goal as a Skybreaker, his quest. And there is something wrong with Shinovar. There's a mystery here, and this book is going to help us dive into it as Szeth tries to resolve it. Kaladin's going to go with him because Dalinar asks him to. That's not what Kaladin wants to do, but he is a good soldier. He will follow orders. He's going along for a few different reasons, as it turns out. One is to try to continue to help Szeth, to get him to heal from the mental challenges, turmoil that he's been in for years. Wit also makes it clear that there's something else going on out there in the West, and you, Kaladin, you have a role to play that you probably don't even know about yet. Be ready for what you discover. Dalinar has specifically tasked him also to look for the herald Ishar, who's out there somewhere in the West. Dalinar had interacted with him back in Rhythm of War, and he clearly was not sane. He's got some issues going on. Dalinar, it's like, you've got to help him. It's been impressive in Rhythm of War seeing how Kaladin has made great strides in helping people through mental illness, mental challenges. And, well, Ishar has some real mental challenges. He thinks he's a god. He thinks he's the god now of Roshar. We got to get through to him. We could really use the Herald's help. So that's another task Kaladin has. Try to take what he's learned so far, help Szeth more, but try to help a Herald. And then right at the start of the book, we get an extra element as Kaladin starts hearing a new voice. The wind. The wind itself is speaking to him, asking for his help. So all of that is set up for this book. A setup that takes over 1,300 pages to resolve. It's a big book. And it does resolve, while leaving us plenty of questions still, for which we'll have to wait for Sanderson to write more books, including the 5 more books he intends to write for the Stormlight Archive, the second arc of his 10-book plan. So let's talk about some of the details of the book, specifically the plot depth first. We get to see just how comprehensive Brandon's plot intentions are for the Stormlight Archive through what he reveals in this book, as well as his thoughts on the Cosmere as a whole. He utilizes so many elements of previous books to bring events to a head in this one. Actions and behaviors that we saw all the way back in the beginning of The Way of Kings play key roles in how the story of Wind and Truth plays out. And the revelations are immensely impactful and wildly satisfying. At the same time, there are aspects of this book that frustrated me in that, in order to be so satisfying here, Sanderson had to leave us somewhat confused and in the dark many, many times in the previous novels. He slowly revealed pieces of his puzzle over the past books, and now he's solving the puzzle for us, or helping us at least. Aha, get these reveals. And honestly, I do think he's done a pretty brilliant job of this. He revealed enough puzzle pieces over the past books that we were satisfied, we were learning things, but now we get to see how much we really didn't know. And when he does that, these big revelations in this book, none of them feel like he cheated or it was a cheap bait and switch from before. It all makes sense, which is pretty incredible. So I can't help but give plot depth here a 5-star rating. Let's talk about the characters. Sanderson's characters truly shine in this story, as we see so many of these key characters taking significant steps forward in personal growth and development, things Sanderson has been building up to through the previous books. Everything seems well connected and natural, and the characters' choices, successes, and frustrations feel very genuine. I believe I appreciated and enjoyed Adolin's journey the best in this book. In addition to his personal growth, his more fully developing relationship with Maya provides some outstanding moments. Each of the books has had a different character really be the one to shine, and I think for Wind and Truth, Adolin gets his moments. I also thought what Sanderson did with Szeth and Kaladin in this story was very well done. And in particular, seeing how Szeth truly becomes a fleshed out and understandable, sympathetic character. And that was pretty awesome because we really hated him back in the day. I did not particularly care for the Renarin and Relaine storyline. Neither have been characters that I really felt much investment in through the previous books, and Sanderson's attempt to build them up here as something so much more critical to the story just didn't play well for me. It felt rather forced. Shallan? I thought her storyline in this novel was okay. And the way her character engaged with the narrative, it was important, it did significant things, but we've had better Shallan, I think. This was adequate. We get a bit more of Yasna in this story that I appreciated. Sanderson fleshes her out more for us, and we get to sympathize with her more fully because of it. I mean, we get some backstory of her that was totally missing before. But at the same time, it was almost like one more thing that Sanderson's trying to squeeze into this book, and it was maybe just a bit too much to try to accomplish. All told, though, the character work is quite decent, and for the most part, enjoyed and appreciated. I give this element of the novel 4 stars. Quite satisfying. Now, for writing style. Here's where I've got some challenges with Wind and Truth, honestly. Sanderson has spent 4 massive novels, 2 novellas, and tie-ins from across the Cosmere novels to set up this book. And still, he chooses to take nearly the first 450 pages just to establish and set up what he wants to do here. The pacing, it's just too slow. That first third of the book in particular. I felt he spent too much time developing characters even more and introducing new relationships that were now going to become massive elements of the story. His writing style here also had me cringing at times early in the book, where I felt he was using large chunks of exposition to try to make massive, broad statements about how our society today ought to be looking at the world, rather than sticking with the story we're actually here to read about. It came off as preachy and directive. This may not be true for you, but I nearly always feel a negative reaction, a pushback, when I sense an author is trying to force a personal value agenda at me. And I got that feeling here in the first parts of the book. It just takes me out of the story, irritates me when I just want to enjoy a great narrative. While eventually Sanderson shifts past this and gets into what he does best, a story that sucks you in and sweeps you away, eventually into a Sanderlanche, the tone and feeling those early parts conveyed lingered. And I really feel like he erred in that part, enough to give the writing style a score of just 3 stars. If the first book of the series had this style of writing at the beginning, I may not have continued with the Stormlight Archive. And I have to say I actually considered a 2 star for this category, but that's only venting my frustration at how I felt on the early portion of the book. The whole second half had the more enjoyable writing style that I've come to appreciate, with Sanderson juggling many different plot lines and seamlessly jumping from POV to POV, keeping all the plates spinning and us pushing hard to the finish, wanting to get there as fast as possible and staying up as late as it takes. When he hits his Sanderlanche, it's always something else, so he clings to the 3 star. Let's talk about themes and messages he's trying to suggest. This is where he gets a little preachy again, and I'm not completely on board with some of what I think he's trying to say with this novel. But here's some of the biggest themes that I felt. Seek your own truth rather than accepting the truth of others. It's not enough just to do what others have decided is the right thing, basically. You need to be sure it's the most right and right for you. What might be right for others may not be right for you. This is the one I felt the least comfortable with as to how Sanderson was expressing it. A second theme, being honorable isn't always a good thing. This one made a little more sense. Honor has driven many people to make terrible decisions, from challenging someone to a duel to literally nations going to war, or even to abandoning those who are relying on you because you have to do the honorable thing. The honorable thing is not always the right thing. That's pretty clear. Another theme. This one I think I found the greatest value in. To care for others, you need to care for yourself. You can't simply always put others ahead of yourself, sacrificing your own needs for their good, because eventually you will run out of steam. It's critical that you care for yourself so that you remain a resource to care for others. That's not being selfish, taking care of yourself. It's actually necessary if you want to be able to live for others. The final one I would chime in on is the power of a promise is the intent behind it. This was an interesting theme that I picked up here, because when you make a promise, you can't know what the future is going to hold. Things may occur where you can't keep your promise, but you can still hold to the intent of your promise. You can still strive to fulfill what you meant when you gave the promise. It's not like the promise is just worthless now because circumstances changed. The intent still matters. I liked that one. There are certainly tons of other themes that can be drawn here, but those are what jumped out the most for me. Warnings for this book? Well, there's lots of battle, injuries, death happening, but they're all handled in a higher fantasy style. There's not a lot of gritty details, so I didn't find that stuff too concerning and have to warn you about. It's just know that it's there. There is an element of childhood trauma involved in the story that could make some people uncomfortable, so be warned about that. My final rating for the book as a whole, 4 out of 5 stars. Every fan of the Stormlight Archive and the Cosmere in general is going to need to read this book and should mostly enjoy it. When you're frustrated with the slog at the beginning and maybe the preachy tone early on, just push on through. You will be glad you did. Okay, what about your thoughts? Those of you who've read it already, do you agree? Do you have other takes? I'd love to hear your thoughts here. Drop them down in the comment box. Let me know I'm not alone in my opinions, or rail at me for having missed the point. Either way, I'll appreciate you took the time to respond, and I will answer back. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoy this book. In the end, I did. We'll talk to you next time.